All right, Unit 8, multiple choice questions on 2D arrays, tracing some algorithms, figuring out what is referenced with two numbers. And before we get started, remember some big ideas with a 2D array is that it's an array of arrays. An array of arrays. It's an array which each element is an array. And then inside of those arrays are elements like integers. And so the other way to remember what's happening is that's always the row, the first number. This is always the column. So when it says 0, 2, that's the first array in this 2D array, and that's the second value. And this one is the third array, or address 2, okay? And that is the first value in that third array, or addressed array. So that's that one. So in this particular case, it's saying which one would make that happen. 1 and 3 would make that happen. 2 is flip-flopped right there, so 1 and 3. So some of these are very similar to that. Can you reference items? Number 2 is similar to that. What would make that work? And that is what happens here. Remember, this is 0th, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. So that's the answer to number 2. Just remember that position. Similar thing here is how you're going to spell cat. You just have to reference values. Remember, that's a 0th array right here. This address 1 array. And so you just need to reference those correctly. And the answer is C for 3. 4, very similar to that as well, kind of just backwards. So you'll just get better at these as you start to work with them. So number 4 is A. I'm going to move past a few of these. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, is that you are trying to figure out how many places will get assigned 9 is the question. And if you look through all this, this is actually irrelevant to what's happening, okay? You don't even need to know that. Here's what you needed to pay attention to. Can you translate that into English? It's essentially saying if the rows mod 2 is 0 and cols mod 2 is 0, that means, of course, even. If your even rows, even columns at the same time, I had to write mine in because it was gone in this PDF. And then you say, how many times does that happen where the row even and the rows is greater than or equal to 2 and the cols is less than or equal to 2? And that would happen only twice, because it's the only row that's greater than or equal to 2 that's even is 2 right here. And the cols that are considered even are 0 and 2. So those are the two spots where that would get assigned 9, at 2, 0 and 2, 2. So the answer is C. Also, kind of a translating thing, and maybe something new, but hopefully you adapt. You kind of figured, oh, that does make sense. Can you use a for each loop with a 2D array? Yep. You can go through for each array in MAT, because remember, MAT is just an array of arrays, because it's a 2D array. What happens? So this says visit each row in MAT and tell me every other element in each row and print it out. Okay, every other, because I'm skipping. I'm not going J++, I'm going J plus equals 2, which means at 0 and then at 2 and so on. And that means I'm going to get every other, and that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. If you look at the row, we got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. All right, so the answer is B. Moving right along, number 7. Again, translating this, what's happening. I'm looking for how many times this is going to print and how many times this is going to print. So the first thing is make sure it's this conditional checks. It can't be the first item in the row, okay? And it's also looking, this translates into English, says if the current element is greater than or equal to the previous element. Again, that means if the current element is greater than or equal to the previous element. Well, the only time that happens is at 1, 2, that 5. The current element is greater than or equal to the third element. That's the only place. So this only happens once. And this asks how many even elements are in that array. And there's 2 even elements, 4 and 2. So that is C. Number 8, also a little bit of a translation things. This if statement says temp's got to be even for this line to execute, and if you look at that array, there's only 1, 2 even numbers. So line 11 executes twice, which was the question. So that's A in number 8. Number 9. This only works, so you had to pay attention to what was happening here. Num dot length is the number of rows. Okay, that is the rows, and you are trying to figure out and sum up each row. So you needed to know how many columns, and that would be r dot length. So this would work if the rows and columns were equal. Okay, and that's the case in many of these. Okay, because I have 2 and 2 items, 2 columns, 2 rows. Or in C, it still works because the last items are 0, so that doesn't change the sum. So this has 3 rows, 3 columns. So the answer is D. And finally, it's saying which one would make this not work as intended. Well, for some reason, this is starting at 1. So the first item is skipped. And the only item listed in the answers that is the first item in a row is the 15. So this would fail and prove that does not work as intended because it would not find a 15 because for some reason, again, I'm not sure why, they skipped the first item. So hope this helps. As always, reach out to me with any questions. See you soon.